It's the first of the month, so that can mean only one thing. Wrap-up videos everywhere. Hi guys, it's Sam, and it is the 1st of April, which can only mean one thing. It means that it is time for my March wrap-up and April TBR. I always enjoy filming these videos and telling you guys what books I read during the month and what I hope to read, so let us get started. So as I started back in January, I started including statistics and things at the beginning of my videos, and that is going to continue on this month. I will tell you guys a little bit of the statistics of the books that I read, and then I will get into the actual books I read and the books that I hope to read. So let us go. So this month I ended up reading a total of 10 things. This was 6 books and 4 graphic novels, 2 of which had started in February. I was hoping to read a little bit more, but some of them were kind of big, and I was getting tired towards the end of the month, and I didn't get as much read, but I'm okay with that. So of these books, as I said before, 4 were graphic novels, 3 or 30% were fantasy, 2 or 20% of them were YA fantasy, 1 or 10% was a classic, and the rest were graphic novels. I read a total of 3,362 pages in March. The bulk of this were fantasy books because, as we all know, fantasy books tend to be big, which I love. Next largest section of that was YA fantasy, then graphic novels, and then finally classics because I only read 1. Of the books that I read, the vast majority were trade paperbacks, of course graphic novels, and then hardbacks. This month I also read about 70% male authors and 30% female authors. In terms of diversity though, from where these authors were from, I fared a little bit better in March than I have in prior months. 60% were from the United States, but then I also ended up reading books from authors from the UK, Japan, and Australia, so that's pretty exciting. Of the books that I read, 2 of them were 5 stars, 3 of them were 4 stars, 2 of them were 3.5 stars, and 3 of them were 3 stars. And lastly, the vast majority of the books that I read were written in the 2000s. There were a couple written before, and 1 written way before because I read 1 classic. So those are the basic statistics from my reading month for March, and now I'll tell you guys the books that I read in March and my thoughts on them. So the first book that I finished in March was one that I started in February, and that was The Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. This book is the 3rd and final book in the Farseer trilogy. I don't want to go too much into it as it is the 3rd book in the series and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but I do have a spoiler-free review as well as a spoilery discussion and review of these books, and I'll link both of them down below if you wanted to go and check them out of this whole series. I really enjoyed it. And it is a bit long. It's like 800 some odd pages. That was one of my main complaints of the story. Some of the scenes were a little bit repetitive, but overall I still really enjoyed it because I absolutely adore Robin Hobb's writing, and I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 star rating, but the series as a whole I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished in March was In Search of the Red Dragon, the 2nd book in the Imaginarium Geographica by James A. Owen. It follows a group of 3 men who are in charge of the Imaginarium Geographica. It is this map book that has the entire land mapped out on it and all the islands and the peoples that reside there. Basically, the Imaginarium Geographica is this parallel universe, if you will, to our own, where all of our stories and fables and myths reside. So they're all true. They live in this other world. This is actually where these stories come from because people used to be able to go right between the worlds freely. And basically, they are in charge of keeping this place safe. So 10 years have passed between the 1st book and the 2nd book. I believe it's 10 years. But definitely some time has passed. Again, I don't want to go too much into it as this is the 2nd book in the series. It wasn't as good as the 1st book to me. It was a little bit more slower paced. I just wasn't as engaged in the narration as I was in the 1st one or in the story and the events that took place. But it was still very well done. This is I would say more of a YA fantasy story, really intelligently written, really fun series, and it definitely has some interesting twists and things and how it incorporates a lot of our own stories and mythologies and things like that. And I ultimately ended up giving this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished was Sabriel by Garth Nix. This is a YA fantasy series I've been meaning to read for years, and I finally read it with Sana from Inkbones Books, Lindsay from Lindsay Ray, and Sarah from Books and Junk. We read this book together. I really enjoyed it. It follows Sabriel, who is a necromancer. Her father was a necromancer before her, and she soon discovers that her father is gone. He's been taken to the land of the dead, so she has to go into the Old Kingdom, which is where she's originally from, though she is being raised on the other side of the wall from the Old Kingdom. So she has to go back and return to where she came from and try and find her dad and rescue him, hopefully before he is completely dead. This story was really well written. I love Sabriel. Sabriel was a very strong female protagonist. I enjoyed her heroism. I enjoyed her character a lot. She just didn't take any crap from anybody, and it was fantastic. It was just a lot of fun, and the concept was very original, and I just really enjoyed it. And I definitely want to continue on with the series. We will be reading the next book next month, and I am very excited to see where it's going to go. I ultimately rated this book 4 out of 5 stars because parts of it were a little bit slow, though I did like the story. I felt like some of it was a little bit more drug out than it needed to be, but I still really enjoyed it, hence its 4 out of 5 star rating. The next book that I finished in March was part of the Year of Cosmere, and that was The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson. This is book 2 in the Mistborn trilogy. Again, this picks up pretty much exactly where the first book left off, so I don't want to give too much away because this is another book in a series, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, though I do believe that parts of it moved a lot more slow than it needed to be. I think events were drug out longer than they needed to be. I think some things could have been wrapped up a little bit more quickly. Vin really annoyed me in this book. She really got on my nerves through most of the book. It did have some very intriguing plot points and has some very interesting twists that I did not see coming. I absolutely continue to love Sazed. Sazed is amazing. He continues to be one of my favorite characters, and I just, oh, so good. The ending really, I cannot wait to read Hero of Ages next month, which is the month I am hosting for Year of Cosmere, so be sure to pick it up. I cannot wait to see how this whole story is going to get resolved. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. The characters continue to be really well developed and have their own distinct personalities. The world still continues to be quite fascinating. However, I thought that it moved a little bit slow, and I think it could have been a good 150, 200 pages less than it was. So that led me to give it the 3.5 out of 5 star rating that I gave it, but I still really enjoyed it and cannot wait to see how it ends. The next book that I read in March is probably my least favorite read of the month and the year so far, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I have been wanting to read this book for ages, and I finally read it with Lindsay because she's been wanting to read it for ages, and she didn't much care for it either. It follows Catherine and Heathcliff, and Catherine and Heathcliff are 2 of the most messed up literary characters I have ever encountered. These 2 people are extremely selfish and manipulative and cruel, unbelievably so. I basically hated every single character in this book, but I'm sorry, this is not really telling you what the book is about. The book follows these 2 characters, Catherine and Heathcliff, and they're basically everybody in this book is extremely selfish. Catherine ends up marrying for money. Heathcliff ends up marrying for revenge, and the story basically shows how they continue to ruin each other's lives as well as the lives of everyone around them. I hated this book. It was well written, I'll give her that, but I hated everybody in this book so much. I wanted to just start bashing this book against the table, like just, no. Yeah. I could not stand anybody. I felt so frustrated. The second half moved a little bit faster than the first half. I think that was my other problem with the book, was that it moved really slow. I just was not engaged in it. I could give a crap about any of the characters. I hated them that much, and I could not stand it, and I could not wait for it to be over. I did like the last couple of chapters. It redeemed it a little bit in my mind, but not enough for me to not give it a 3 out of 5 star rating. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it was still well written. I had strong reaction to it, so that's something, but overall, just not a fan. I've yet to read Anne. I have read 2 of Charlotte's works, and I've now read Emily Bronte, and thus far I think I can say that I still prefer Charlotte Bronte's works over Emily's, so definitely my least favorite read of March. And the last book that I finished in March was a reread for me, and that is The Fox by Sherwood Smith, the second book in the Inda series. I was buddy reading this with Sabrina from Stay Cucino, and I started this back in February, but I didn't get that far through it, and I finished it this month. I continue to love this book series. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This is one of my favorite in the series. It is fantastic. Definitely a lot of pirate and ship action that went on, more fantasy elements, and it is just fantastic and amazing. There's so many twists and turns in this book, and it's just as good as I remember it. Also, in case you may have missed it, I am going to be hosting starting in April Inda Club. Thank you to Sabrina for helping me come up with that name. It is a read along I'm going to be doing over the next several months. We will be reading 1 book a month, starting with Inda, book 1 in April. Then we'll be going on to Fox, book 2 in May, and then book 3 will be King's Shield. And in July, we will be reading book 4, King's Shield. So we're going to be reading all these books. I'll link the Goodread group down below, and be sure to use hashtag Inda Club on Twitter so we can all follow each other's progress, and I hope you guys will join in. So I'll link that video down below if you missed it. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this, and I will keep it at its 5 out of 5 star rating that I had it at. Now we are going to move on to the graphic novel section of this video. I read 4 graphic novels. The first graphic novel that I read this month was the second volume of Amulet by Kazuo Kibuishi. This is the continuation of the Amulet series. This is book 2, The Stonekeeper's Curse. I really enjoyed it. It's just a really, really fun graphic novel series. I love the art style. I like seeing where the story is going. It takes back up with our main heroine and her family and just how the events in the world are shaping out and just all that good stuff. It didn't blow my socks off, but I still really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I really, really enjoy the artwork in these so much. They're just really, really, really fun artwork. I don't know what it is about it. I just really, really enjoy looking at it. It's just so pretty. It's just such pretty artwork. Like, look at that layout, you know? Very, very beautiful illustrations. The next graphic novel that I finished and is now one of my favorites is the first volume of Chew, Taster's Choice by John Layman and Rob Gilroy. Chew basically follows this detective, Tony Chew, who's a Sebopath. He has the ability to eat things, and when he eats them, he'll be able to know its entire history. So if it's a crop, he'll know what pesticides were used, where it was grown, how it was grown, things like that. And then he discovers one day that if he tastes human flesh, he can help solve the murder that way. He'll know how the person died and who did it, etc. Really, really disgusting concept, is so original, and this graphic novel was just hilarious. I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait to get my hands on the other volumes and see where it's going to go. I mean, it's seriously disgusting, but trust me, it's hilarious. And plus, in this world, it takes place in our world, but like an alternate history. Chickens have been outlawed because of avian flu, so there's this whole black market thing, and Tony Chew actually works for the FDA, which is now like the biggest crime fighting organization, and it is just fantastic. And I really love the artwork in this. It's very, very quirky, but really enjoyable. I don't know, I just really, really enjoyed the art style to this graphic novel series, and I have already gotten volume 2 if you saw my book haul that was posted a couple days ago, and I cannot wait to continue on with this graphic novel series. The next graphic novel that I read was not your typical graphic novel, but was something that I really, really loved, and that is the Saga of Rex by Michael Gagney. Michael Gagney, he's an animator. He's done work for Disney, Nickelodeon, and things like that. Really, really, really fantastic art. Saga of Rex basically follows this adventure of this fox named Rex, but the story is told primarily through pictures. There's very little writing and dialogue, but it is still really beautiful. The art style is gorgeous. It's very whimsical. So I say if you really, really like art in graphic novels and you just like looking at the pictures and seeing the art styles and things like that, I think you would really enjoy this. But if you're more of a graphic novel lover who likes a story, like a written story, then you probably might not like this one as much, but for the artwork alone, I absolutely loved it. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And the final graphic novel that I read this month was also my least favorite, and that was Deadly Class by Rick Remender and Wes Craig. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Was not really the biggest fan of the story or the art style. The art style just didn't appeal to me. It just, I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of it. The coloration was beautiful. It was done really well, but the story itself, I just did not like. I didn't really like any of the characters. I didn't really care how the story was going to go out and all that. So I'm probably not going to pick up the later volumes of Deadly Class when they come out, but yeah, just kind of fell flat for me a bit. So I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. So now moving on to the books that I'm going to be starting in April. I have a lot of buddy reads planned, so these are the books I plan on buddy reading. I'm not quite sure what other books I want to throw in that I'm not buddy reading yet. I'm just going to go with the flow. But the first book that I'm going to be buddy reading this month in A Bunch of My Friends is going to be The Crown Tower by Michael J. Sullivan. This is the prequel series by Michael J. Sullivan, so it shows Royce and Hadrian from the Radio Revelation series, how they met and got together, and I need coffee. Emergency coffee break over. And how they got together and how they met. So I'm excited to read it. I've been meaning to read it forever, and I just decided to wait until everybody else read it, and so we are going to be starting that one on the 1st. The next book that I'm going to be reading in April, which I've been meaning to read forever, I'm going to be reading with Caitlin from Kitty G, and that is Ruby Red by Kristen Kishore. I have been meaning to read this series forever. This has been on my TBR shelf since I started BookTube. I think it's one of the first books I bought when I started my BookTube channel, so I am excited to read it. I know it's about time travel. That's all I really know. I'm intrigued enough to see where it's going to go, so yay! The next book I'm going to be reading is another one I've been meaning to start for ages, and that is The Black Prison by Brent Weeks. I love Brent Weeks. I loved his Night Angel trilogy, and I'm excited to read this one. I hear that the first book is not as good as his Night Angel trilogy, but I am still intrigued to see where it goes, particularly since I hear the next books in the series get even better, so I'm excited to be starting and reading this one. Also this month, I'm going to be starting The Gardens of the Moon, the first book in the Fall of the Moloton by Steven Erikson. This is Michael from Bitten by Radioactive Books, one of his most favorite series, and I cannot wait to see what I think of it. I'm just excited to get into it and read it and all of that. I mean, and the cover is really cool, that spooky tower. So, yes, this is happening, and I'm intrigued to see where it's going to go. The next book that we are supposed to be reading this month is going to be Camelot Burning by Catherine Rose. This is an Arthurian retelling with steampunk elements, so doesn't that sound awesome? I was intrigued enough. Michael and I were supposed to be reading it, and Sana listening in. Sana wasn't the biggest fan, but I am excited to see what I think of it because it's an intriguing concept, I think. Steampunk and Arthurian stories. It's like perfect. And Lindsay, Sana, and I are going to be reading the second book in the Sabriel Porson series, and that is Lyrial. Cannot wait to see where it's going to go, especially since I really enjoyed Sabriel, and yeah, it's going to be fun. I do have a couple of books I know I'm going to be reading on my own this month. The first one is going to be The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. I've been meaning to read this one forever. It's a chunker, so I'm hoping I'll be able to get through it, or at least most of it. This is something that's been on my list for ages. And can we just take a moment to adore this wonderful World Cloud edition? I mean, look at it. It's shiny! And I like the engraved lettering. And the end pages, and it's so pretty. But anyway, that's beside the point. I'm excited to see what the story holds because I heard it's quite hilarious. And the next thing I plan on reading this month is the second volume of Chew, and hopefully the other volumes too. I might end up caving and buying them because I'm addicted to this series and I cannot wait to see where it is going to go. Alright guys, that was my rather long March wrap-up April TBR. I hope you enjoyed it though. Let me know down in the comments what you plan on reading this next month and what you read in March, what your favorite book was. Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to check out all the links down below and all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy reading. Bye! And myself, and it is very exciting. We are reading all of Brandon Sanderson's, or at least most of his stuff, all year round, a new book each month. And like I said, next month rather, in April, is going to be Hero of Ages, the final book in the Mistborn trilogy. So this is just an announcement video, so you can be sure to have time to pick up the book and be able to get it and join us in the discussion